To make a covered wrist strap for your Terrific Toadstool, again I've measured out my elastic and I've used 25 centimeters of elastic, and in order to get the length of and the sort of depth of my strap, what I've done is I've just added a little bit onto the width. So my elastic is 3 centimeters wide, so I've doubled that and added a centimeter seam allowance, although I probably won't use a full centimetre seam allowance, it'll be slightly less than that. So I've got 8 centimetres going across my fabric, and I have a length of 50 centimetres, and this will be enough to encase my elastic. The first thing I need to do is to create the case. The first thing I need to do is to create my casing. So I'm going to fold the fabric, and if you were working with a fabric that had a very definite right side and a very definite wrong side, you want to have your right sides facing. I'm going to fold it in half. I'm going to pop a few pins in, and then I am going to machine down the long edge, and I'll probably be about 1/2 centimetre or so from the edge. Now I'm going to use a contrasting colour so that you can see what I've done before I turn it the right way out. So make sure that you've pinned all the way along, and then we're just going to machine that raw edge closed. The casing is now machined along that long edge, and I'm going to go and give it a press and turn it the right way out. Make sure that you have machine stitched, reverse stitched to secure the thread at the start as well as at the finish of your casing, because you don't want that coming undone when you turn it the right way out. I've now ironed my strap, having turned it the right way out. Now when you've turned it the right way out, you can either have the seam resting on the side, or like I've done here, you can pop the seam in the middle, and this will become the inside of my elastic strap. As I say, you can also have it on the outside as well. The next step is to thread our elastic through. I'm using a safety pin just through the top of my elastic, and that's going to help me thread my elastic through my strap. So I'm just going to wiggle that in, and then I keep one thumb on the base of the safety pin, and then I just push the fabric up over the safety pin, and I can then start easing my elastic into my casing. Now you will notice that we have 2 ends here, and our fabric is much longer than our elastic, so I'm going to be easing it in, but when I get to the end here, I'm going to very carefully put a safety pin through to stop my elastic from being dragged into the casing. So it's a little bit of wiggling, and again, if you've got any wrinkles, you want to sort of pull them out so everything is nice and flat. There we go. And I'm just going to tease out the end, and now I'm going to pop a safety pin in, and I'm going to be about probably sort of 2 centimeters from the end, and that'll be important in our next step. So that's going to stop my elastic getting dragged through my casing. I can now relocate my safety pin, keep my thumb that's doing the pushing nice and still, ease the fabric over the safety pin that I've got at the other end, and then I can just pull it through. Now your fabric will start to wrinkle, which is exactly what we want it to do, but just keep easing it in and over. And now this is where we need to be careful at the other end, so I'm just going to pop a pin in whilst I start to sort out the elastic. So I've just got the edge of the elastic and my fabric level. I'm going to pin it probably about 5 or 6 centimeters away from that while I get ready to do the next stage. So I'm going to remove my pin and pop that to one side. I'm going to then cut off those loose ends. Now the first thing I'm going to do before I machine down my elastic is I'm going to just machine across this end to hold the elastic in place, and I'm going to do exactly the same at the other end as well. So I am probably going to be about 1/2 centimetre from the edge of the fabric, and that's going to secure our elastic so it can't vanish into our casing. So I have sewn my ends, and I've used a zigzag stitch, as that's quite good when working with stretch materials. I've also now marked my just over 1.5 centimetres from one end and 4 centimetres from the other end, where I don't want any pleats of fabric, because that's where we overlap and join the strap together before attaching it to the base of the lid. I've given it a bit of a stretch, and that's helped to even out my gathers, as I am going to be now starting to think about machining them down. Now, if you like your gathers as they are and you don't want to do any machining, absolutely fine. What I would recommend is to do a line of straight stitching across your end there and another one across the end there, and then continue as for constructing the rest of the strap. For this particular one, I'm going to sew them in place so I keep a nice even fold of fabric all the way along, and I've folded this particular part in half, and I'm then going to place a pin into my elastic. I'm then going to quarter them, lining up my pins and inserting another pin into the fabric and the elastic. There we go. So the last marker I'm going to put in is this end, and again, it doesn't have to be completely exact, it's just got to be pretty close. So I've now marked out where are my sort of the regions where I want to kind of keep my fabric pleats. The pins that I've placed in are now markers, and what I'm going to do is set my sewing machine to a very fine zigzag. Again, I'm using a contrast thread so that you can see it on camera, and I am going to machine a line of stitches coming all the way down the center of my strap. Now, the pins are going to help us here. As I start machining, I'm going to get to my first pin, stop and pause, leave my needle in the middle of the fabric there, and I'm going to then stretch the strap so that the fabric between that first pin and the second pin is nice and flat. And then as I'm going to sew it, I'm going to keep it stretched until I reach the next pin, when I can just relax a bit and repeat the process. Leave the needle in, press a foot up, take the pin out, press a foot back down, and then I'm going to stretch it again and machine up to my next pin. Please be careful about machining over pins, because it can do damage to your machine. So I've now finished securing my gathers more or less down the centre of my strap. Please remember to use a thread colour that matches your fabric. As I say, I've used the white just for demonstration purposes. Now, I've also just remarked where my allowances were, because I've lost those, so I've just used a bit of tailor's chalk to make sure that I do my allowances in the right place. So here we go. I've marked up both sides, and I'm now going to do a piece of straight stitching there to join the ends together. Now, just for reference, the seam is on the inside, because that's going to become the inside of my strap, and I'm now got the outsides facing me, ready to go over that end. I've now completed, and I've joined my strap together along this line of stitching here, so you can see that's nice and secure. Because of the bulk, I'm going to just trim off my shorter end, as I don't need that in position in quite the same way now. And what I would like to do is I'm just going to trim off the hairy bits of this end as well. With the uncovered strap, we tucked the elastic in and then folded it over and stitched down this second pleat. Now, you can do that if you know that your machine is good with a bit of bulk, but because this excess isn't wider than the stitching base, we can just very quickly just secure it on the machine so that it doesn't get in the way. So if I'm doing this particular fabric strap, I would probably just, having cut off the smaller edge, fold that nice and flat. Whilst machining, I try and pull it as flat as possible and just secure that with a line of zigzag stitching. So I've now just secured this strap down with this line of stitching here, and I can just trim off any loose threads and sort of fluffy bits, and you can use a bit of tape to get rid of them if you need to as well. And then we would be attaching this strap to the base of the base of your lid in much the same way as we have done in the tutorial. So the bit of the elastic that you have just finished machining would be pushed against the base, and the turn, or the bit, if you've just happened to machine it flat, sits within inside the holes, so that you will be able to just comfortably hand sew it into position onto the lid. And it also, that bit there does also give you a little bit of padding against the lid as well, which might make it a little more comfortable. Happy sewing!